Hey y'all, and welcome back to another video of My Creative Life with Kel Sweetie, where we read, we make art, and essentially do whatever our creative hearts desire. Today, we're going to talk about mothers. Happy Mother's Day. One of my favorite tropes are about mothers in thrillers or horror or whatever, speculative fiction, since that is the tag word of the year for me. And so I thought, what better than to have a video on Mother's Day, since I usually release on Sundays anyway, than showing some of my favorite stories in regards to mothers, and also showing how mothers can be represented in many different ways in everyone's lives, since I know for some people today is a harder day, and for some people it's a complicated day, and for some people it's a new way to celebrate the day. So I thought, why don't I share some stories about mothers, some of my favorites, some that just run the gambit. So let's get into it. I'm so excited to show y'all what I've been reading basically for the past year and a half. So like I said, today is a very complicated day for many people, whether that's you've lost a mother, whether you have a hard relationship with a mother, whether you're a new mother, whether you're an expecting mother, whether you and your mom actually do have a good relationship. And so I think that, I love the topic of mothers because for our society, mothers are the beginning of everything. Mothers can be the beginning of what you expect out of people. Mother could be the expectation for yourself. Mother could be where your trauma begins. Mother can be where, is a safe space for you. It can be many different things. And I think that that's probably one of the best tropes for horror and thriller, because what is more horrifying than the person that should be the safest place for you? And if they are, why are they? And if they're not, why not? And also, the term mother can be more than just the person who gave birth to you. It could be somebody who has made that safe space for you when the one who gave birth to you didn't, So, very complicated topic, but as me loving the trope of mothers, I thought Mother's Day would be the best day to celebrate how many great books I've read regarding mothers. It was hard to make this list because I was trying to keep in mind topics, because I have read so many books about mothers. Here are a few that didn't make the list. The Last House on Needless Street, Jackal, even Autumn Crow High could have made this list. It did not. Chlorine, which I just finished, it could have made this list. It did not. Coraline didn't make this list, but it's great. Baby Teeth, as y'all know, I have been obsessed with Baby Teeth since I read it. It is very close to me because it really helped me understand my mom better in her illness. It didn't make this list. Surprise, surprise. The only one left. Another mother story. How to Sell a Haunted House. Another mother story. Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, about mothers, a mother story. The Seven Visitations of Sydney Burgess, another mother story. I have so many. Not So Perfect Strangers, another mother story. Mother Thing, it's a mother story. I didn't include it because I feel like there will be so many references to Mother Thing this Mother's Day, and I wanted maybe something a little different. I mean, the list goes on and on. That's me just, and I haven't even gotten to like my lit fic genre shelf and everything, where probably the more healthier relationships of mother are located here. One of those, Where the Heart Is, didn't make this list, but Found Family, read that book. There are so many mother stories. I am obsessed with the trope, so I had to do this video. I had to absolutely do this video. That is a long list of suggestions I just gave you. So go look those up. Even though they didn't make this list of ones that I'm about to go more in depth in, all of those are about mothers, and all of those I can more or less recommend. More or less. Some of those I'm like, I can appreciate you, even though you weren't a home run. But some of those were home runs. Nonetheless, let's get into it. I thought that I would go through the different transitions of motherhood for this list. So let's start off with expecting mothers. Here, I'm going to say this right now so I can put this in the beginning of me announcing the book. I am now going to give you an opportunity to skip the expecting new mothers portion of this video in order for you to get to the next one if you don't want the spoiler, the surprise of the book I'm about to talk about ruined for you. Gosh, editing me just had to cut that video up a lot, and I apologize to her already. Okay, let's get into the book. Here's my reference. I know that a lot of the book I'm about to show you all, the mother trope in it, the pregnancy trope, I know a lot of y'all are like, I'm turning off right now because I don't love a pregnancy trope. I hate a pregnancy trope. Honestly, I don't really feel any sort of way towards a pregnancy trope. At the end of the day, if the story was still good, I don't have a problem with it. That's my whole thing about it. I know that some people are just like, people get lazy and they throw a pregnancy in there. And I get the politics of it too. It's like, oh, I'm worth something now that I have a baby in my stomach and everything. And I understand that as well. For me, when I read this book, it didn't make or break the book for me personally. That was Severance. I know there are so many people out there who are like, I love this book and then hate it as soon as they throw a kid in it. And just know, if you've not read Severance and I just told you there was a kid, when it was announced to me, I personally didn't feel like it was a make or break for me or that it was a huge surprise or anything like that, personally. I didn't have a problem with the pregnancy in here. I know that there's a lot of people who love the book and then the pregnancy trope was brought up and then it ruined it for them. It didn't do that for me. So, you know, take that as you will. Our main character is going back and forth between present and past. So that's another thing. If the whole multiple time thing also bothers you, that also will probably turn you off from Severance. I loved it because it felt very realistic. It was written before the pandemic happened. And what was crazy is that it really, it's like reading Parable of the Sower. It's like these authors really got it down to a science on how society would act if we were to shut down because of illness, because of a pandemic that happened. And that's exactly what happens in this book, except they don't have a when it was over moment that we're currently in right now. And it blew me away because when I read it, I think we were just now opening up back outside. And I just couldn't believe how accurate this was to not only like society starting to shut down, but also as our main character is first generation from immigrant parents and like people of color are taught as our responsibility to our employers before even putting ourselves first. And as society's starting to break down, that's exactly what our main character is doing. She is also looking back on that time while also traveling with this survivor unit, which feels very culty. And it's very interesting. I think the sickness in this book is very interesting. It's kind of like this sickness of the mind where you start to do the same routine over and over until essentially your body decomposes. And I think that's an interesting I think this book is so great a commentary on work ethic and work-life balance and routine, and that being the demise of us as humans. All of that has nothing to do with being a mother. But the main character does find out that she is pregnant while surviving the apocalypse, essentially. And the way that it kind of comes forward, I think that it's a very realistic interpretation of somebody who isn't necessarily against the idea of having children, would be. I think that I wasn't turned off or I felt like all of a sudden she was just like, you know, I've got to protect me and my child or anything like that. So it wasn't cringy to me on how Ling-Ma wrote this character. But I thought that it was very interesting to include something like that in here and how people, when finding this out, how they react. And I think that it's a very exaggerated interpretation of the reaction that our society even now, not an apocalypse, reacts to people who have just found out that they were pregnant. It's almost like your sins are relieved of you. You no longer have to work. Actually, don't work because it's bad for the baby. This, that, and the other. And I think that that's very interesting. So that's my first recommendation as far as expecting mothers on this Mother's Day. Read Severance as something that's not so what to expect when expecting, but there's an expectance in here. The next book that I can recommend, I keep in mind that is the only spoiler. That is the only spoiler novel. The rest of these are, you know what's going to happen. So let's be clear on that. But my next one has to do with new mothers. And that book is Night Bitch. I have loved this book since I read it. This book, I feel like I know that there's some people, again, who feel polarized on liking this book. Me personally, I love this book because I felt like the main character explained my biggest fears as far as motherhood are concerned, and why I'm not really, I don't want to be a mother so perfectly in her experience being a new mother and once being an artist and many different things. Night Bitch is about a suburban mother. And I don't even think that they ever actually say her name. It's just Mother. She is not known as any individual. She is not given a name. None of the mothers are given a name in this book. They are all the blonde mother, the cheery mother, you know, the main mother and everything. And what I loved about it, she's turning into a dog. She's like, why do I feel this way? I think I'm turning into a dog. She tells her husband. Her husband says, no, you're not. You're just stressed. Quit. All this stuff. And a lot of it is coinciding with her not feeling like herself anymore, going through postpartum depression, going through her depression of and questions of whether or not she's a good enough mother to her newborn child, wondering why she doesn't seem perfect as in comparison to these other mothers who are in her cohort and in the city that she is in, and all of that. And the idea of perfectionism as a mother, the rule books of being a mother, I absolutely loved it because I felt like it had great dialogue about the idea of losing your identity after becoming a mother, because to the rest of the world, that's who you are. That's all you've been now. So, Night Bitch. Absolutely loved it. I really would recommend it to anybody who is like experiencing new motherhood and experiencing any of those things that I just talked about or anything. I think that there were moments that were funny and moments that were heartwarming and moments that just felt very real, even for somebody who is not a mother and doesn't have plans to be. I feel like it talked about some of those things that I've thought about in regards to that decision for myself. So, absolutely love this book. Gave it 5 stars across the board. I think all of the ones that I'm about to recommend, I have given at least 4 stars to. My third recommendation is for people who do not have the best relationships with their mother and also trauma from their mother. So, passed down generational trauma in regards to motherhood as well. And that is The Push. One of my top books from last year. Absolutely, absolutely loved this book because I really loved how it talked about generational trauma and how not wanting to be a mother but being forced to be can manifest like that depression, that anger, that resentment within a mother very, very differently throughout the different generations. This all follows Blythe. She is our mother in this one. And Violet, her daughter, she believes is a serial killer psychopath. And she is not certain if she believes that and she's a bad mother. And maybe these things I'm seeing is because I'm a bad mother or because she really is a psychopath. And the entire book is about her gaslighting herself and being gaslit by her husband, who is horrible. I hate him. Worst guy. He's worse than the daughter. On whether or not she's just a mad mother or whether it's because her daughter is actually a sociopath. And in between that story and all of that telling, you're also getting the story of her mother as well as her grandmother and how their trauma that they enacted on the one following basically manifest itself into her and further down. And the idea that forced motherhood, especially in generations before us now who feel like we have some sort of choice, but it was even more like put on our grandparents or grandmothers and stuff of that nature, how their trauma manifested into one thing or another, whether it's depression, abuse, aloofness, anger. And I love that. Because I feel like there's so many people who are so quick to say, well, our mothers wanted to be mothers, or our grandmothers wanted to be mothers, and now people don't want to be mothers because they're selfish. No, people did not change. Opportunities and society changed. And there were plenty of grandmothers who did not want to be mothers. There were plenty of mothers who did not want to be mothers. But because of where we were in society, that choice was not given to them, or wasn't even a possibility. And there was anger and trauma and everything attached to that. And we should look into that instead of ignoring it. And that's exactly what I got out of this book that made me absolutely love it, especially growing up in a 3-generational household. Like, I was raised by both my mother and my grandmother. And because of that, I saw motherhood in so many different ways. So absolutely love this. I really recommend it to anybody who's struggling. One, generational motherhood, but also those who have strained relationships with their mother. I really recommend The Push to you. My 4th recommendation is for those who have lost a mother this Mother's Day. And as somebody who lost their grandmother 2 years ago, and a mother who is still working through her feelings and still dealing with her loss and grief, and will probably for the rest of her life, and me dealing with it in my own way because of what she meant to me as a mother figure, I read Rouge, and really, it was very hard to get to the end of it. Now, I think one thing that is in it is definitely strained motherhood relationships, especially growing up in a 3-generational household and everything. But one thing that I loved about Rouge is that it talked about motherhood in this very realistic way, which was not as aggressive as The Push was, and was not as loving as, like, a more traditional motherhood story would be and everything. It talked about in a realistic way of the fact that the mother-daughter relationship sometimes is, I absolutely love you, and I'm having such a great time with you. And sometimes it's, you really messed me up. And I think that Rouge ran the gambit on mother-daughter relationships, both with the 3 generations growing up in her household with our main character, while growing up, as she got older, that sense of strain between her and her mother, that sense of like hiding secrets from each other, not really knowing each other. But the monologue from a jellyfish is what really brought me to tears on this one. There is a monologue from a jellyfish at the end of this book that breaks down the so complicated concept of being a mother, and this idea of being a woman in our society and being jealous and protective all at once because of the competition society puts on us on youthfulness and on success, and wanting the best for your child, but also going, and what about me? And that selfishness that sometimes comes out of mothers when they're also like, if they're not sitting here being selfish, then I'm giving all of myself and there's nothing left for me either, and there's no balance. Rouge. If you are dealing with that, if you're dealing with the grief and everything, I do recommend Rouge, because I feel like it's very different as far as a grief and mother novel is concerned. Let me explain to you what this is, because I haven't explained to you. Our main character, this is magical realism, by the way. It is a fever dream. You will get to the middle of this book and not know what's happening. I'm gonna give you that warning right now, because that make or breaks this book for some people. But our main character is back home for her mother's funeral. Her mother has passed, and she has found out that her mom got involved with a beauty cult at one time or another, and now she's trying to backtrack how that beauty cult might have been involved with her mother's murder. But while trying to backtrack and do some investigating, she becomes a part of the beauty cult and everything. And her descent into madness and her descent into facing many different traumas from her childhood, and ending in this culmination of forgiveness and realization and reflection and jellyfish. That is Rouge. And I had a great time reading it.
I just wanted to take a second to pause it right here because as I was editing, I realized there was another book that I really should have recommended as well here, and that was Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. It was a very heart-wrenching memoir about her life as a Nick star, but also mainly her life with her mother. And it was written after her mother had passed after years of abuse, and it really went over how complicated a relationship with a parent who's abusive can be, where you love that person entirely, but honestly will never really get that solution, that satisfaction of the why, but still sitting there and going, but I still love you and I don't know why. And I'm trying to deal with that. And I'm trying to deal with grieving you while also at the same time being glad that the abuse is over. And I just feel like it's such an amazing memoir that hits a very complicated concept of grief where it wasn't just all so happy 24/7 with you and your mother, or it was very complicated relationship with your mother that wasn't just simply black and white, I miss her. And it really sparked a big conversation between my mom about her mother's passing and my grandmother's passing and their past together and their story together and how she feels now that she's gone and questions she still has and anger she still holds because it never had a solution, but hurt that she has because she's no longer here. So I really recommend it. It's a hard read, but it was absolutely worth all of the hype it received when it was out.
My next recommendation has to do with those who have found mothers in others. And this is a two-parter because I found two different books because I did want to include a little bit of cozy in this. I'm not heartless, you know. And one of the books that I wanted to recommend is probably one of the hardest books I've ever read and most visceral books I've ever read. And so I wanted to have something for anybody who is not wanting that anger and hurt and need in their book. I wanted to give something to you that is not necessarily as aggressive. Okay, so stick with me here. And those two books, first starting off with This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. This book is visceral. Don't let its length fool you. This book was so hard to read, and it took me such a long time to read it because it deals so heavily with depression, and it does not hold back whatsoever. Thiago is dealing with the death of his fiance, his wife Vera, which was very strange how it happened. And before it happened, there were a lot of things happening in their new house that said that something weird, what strange was happening, that there was some entity that was around them that didn't feel right. Thiago is trying to deal with the grief of losing this love of his life very horribly. Like, not well at all, on the suicidal even. Where I feel like a found mother really happens in this book is that the most heartwarming portions of this book are actually when Tiago's mother-in-law comes back into his life to help him figure out what's happening to him, that is happening around him, that to bring together this grief from a mother and the one who like loved her outside of her mother. And it was really gorgeous. It was so amazing to read these two dealing with that together, but also to have this woman hold Tiago in a way that nobody else could reach him. Honestly, she was the last frontier for his depression and everything that he's dealing with in this grief. This is very hard. to read. So I do not recommend it like lightly. It is an amazing book, but please, trigger warnings all over the place, content warnings all over the place. Please, please, please do your research on whether or not it will be triggering for you, because it is a lot, but it is amazing. Next book. The second book I'd recommend for a found mother type of book that is much, much more cozy is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I know everyone in the world has probably recommended this book to you already, and you're gonna get one more person recommending it to you because, in all honesty, it's worth the hype. I know, I'm constantly trying to find another book that people are constantly recommending that's not worth the hype, and this will not be one of them. Now, Under the Whispering Door, absolutely hated it. It's not worth the hype. As far as the found family concept is concerned, it's honestly, truly, utterly boring. This is not boring. There is plot. The family apart on this ship are actually likable, and there's honestly a lot of motherhood, mothering concepts in this book that I would truly, truly recommend. There were so many parts that made me really reflect and made me like pull at the heartstrings. So I really recommend this. This basically is about the crew of the Wayfarer. The crew, basically their whole thing is punching holes in the universe for like space highways. That's their job. But they're a family on this crew, even though they're different species and have different viewpoints and the whole nine, they somehow learn to not only have compassion and love for one another, but coexist and cohabitate together and want to cohabitate together. And it's told in a way that is not, okay, everybody love each other, kumbaya, which is what I was expecting when I read this book, because I had also read Under the Whispering Door where I felt that. This did not read or was written in that type of way. You felt actually like, oh, I'm reading an actual story, and I get that it's telling me things and morals and compassion, but it's not telling me it in a way that makes me feel like it's a Sunday school special. And that I absolutely appreciated in this book. If you are looking for found mother type of relationships, I do recommend this book to you. So definitely try that out. I loved reading this book. I think I gave it nearly 5 stars if I didn't give it 5, because it was really worth that for me. And last are mothers and daughters who have good relationships, mothers and children who have good relationship. What I think I did realize, though, I will say this, almost all of these except for This Thing Between Us and technically The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet have to do with mother-daughter relationships. And that is a problem. I will say The 7 Visitations of Sydney Burgess is a mother-son conversation. Of course, The Shining is a mother-son conversation. The Last House on Needless Street is a mother-son conversation. And Not So Perfect Strangers are a mother-son conversation. So if you are looking for that relationship, those are some great recommendations on representations of that relationship. But I just realized that there's not as many books about a mother-son relationship as I'd want to share. In that same vein, I do not read a lot of books that have a healthy mother-child relationship. Contrary, you would think that I had huge mother-daughter issues, and I don't. However, I don't know, there's something to say about people who do, I guess. I don't know. So I had to really kind of get a little bit creative with this. The first one that I recommend is Natural Beauty. While the mother-daughter relationship in this one is not the absolute focus of this book, it has a lot to say that it is a reoccurring point for our main character, that she is always thinking about her parents, her responsibility to her parents, but also the fact that her parents supported her entirely, absolutely, completely, and there was healthy love there for both of them. So I thought that I should include this because motherhood and parents, that as far as a healthy relationship, does come up in this. Regardless of the fact that it is not the absolute focus of the book, it is representation of that in a horror thriller novel. I know that we can't find a lot of that in a horror thriller novel. You know what I would love if you guys have any recommendations though. I'm thinking like a mother-daughter serial killer trio. I mean duo. A mother and a daughter. Oh, I guess September House would be that, huh? Like a mother-daughter relationship of fighting an entity in a house. I guess that'd be September House. Well, there you go, guys. I haven't read one yet, but they're out there. In Natural Beauty, if you've not heard about this one either, our main character, what was her name again? Oh, actually, we never get her name. That was one of the main things about the whole book, is that our narrator, she doesn't even get a name. Everyone else in the book gets a name except for her, because the conversation of importance and identity and all of that. But our main character, she was a genius at the piano and went to a conservatory where she may or may not experience some sort of abuse of many different kinds while she was there, and ends up leaving because of her parents getting in a huge crash and her having to take care of them. She ends up running into the daughter of, or the niece of, this big beauty industry called Holistic, and starting to work for them. And basically she starts to go crazy from using their products and basically going down this rabbit hole of like unethical products that are supposedly good for you. And it's a whole conversation about the beauty industry and what is beauty to in our society, what is considered that, and identity and responsibility to our parents, healthcare versus holistic care, and all of that. It's an amazing novel, again, worth the hype that it was getting. But it does have an actual healthy mother-daughter relationship in it. So there you go. I found you guys one actual book about it. It's not the focus, but it's definitely in there. The other book that I recommended, it's actually not the full book, because y'all know that I have a very strange relationship to this book on whether or not it was any good. However, we should know here that I'm a huge Megan Giddings stan. Absolutely love her. Which, oh, by the way, The Woman Could Fly, another book that has to do with motherhood. Go ahead and check that one out. There you go. There goes another recommendation. But her short story in Peach Pit was absolutely amazing. And it has to do with motherhood and identity, and where the push has to talk about generational trauma. Her story, the scholarship, has to do, scholarship opportunity, has to do with an amazing story about generational identity, and how from finding your identity as a daughter, you can bolster and give the confidence to your mother to also find that identity within herself, or say the things that she's always been feeling or saying, and healing that generational like trauma and identity and theft. The story is very like abstract and everything, but it has to do with our main character. She's a young Black girl, and she's entering the Worst Girl in America contest. And she's entering it with many versions of herself, better or worse. And it's kind of set up like Miss America, but it's for the worst girl in America. And the entire audience is there, and her mother is constantly, they're all always talking about like, she's the worst girl ever. Like, why can't you be a good girl? And good being very subjective in the idea that it's like, why can't you just say yes and wear pretty skirts and not argue and all this other stuff. And basically, as the story goes on, she's not necessarily categorized as bad, but more and more, and she realizes she's not categorized as bad, but more and more just outspoken and not fully perfect little miss, this is my little child type of girl. And by the end of it, she's sitting there and she finally has this moment to rage out about this frustration of not being categorized as good because of not meeting the expectations of a girl, a good girl, and giving that okay to her mother to do the same at the very end. And I absolutely loved it. It made me feel extremely, extremely emotional, because I feel like the same has happened in my personal relationship with my mother, that me having the freedom and speaking my mind and living my life and learning and healing and growing, I in turn give my mom the opportunity to do the same. And I think that that's just a beautiful story. I think that it's not necessarily your like cookie cutter mom and daughter get along type of story. And I think that that's what makes it even stronger. And it's only like 5 pages. Like I will buy anything Megan Giddings has to offer. I still have to read Lakewood by her, but as soon as I do, I'm up to date and I'm buying up whatever her next book is. She just gets me. Absolutely gets me. Okay, that is it. Those are my recommendations for Mother's Day and some of my more favorite stories for the mother trope that I'm absolutely obsessed with. I gave a lot of recommendations of other mother books that you can check out on your own, but these are some of my favorite. I hope that today you're having an amazing time with your mother, and if not your own mother, I hope that whatever problems or issues you may be experiencing with your mother, that you do heal from them, and that, you know, today can be something more than just grief for you. I truly do believe that. I know that today comes in many different forms for many different people, and I so hope that, you know, these stories can at least help you get through some of that. But I absolutely hope that you enjoyed today's video. Please like if you liked this video and subscribe down below if you're interested in more book recommendations. We cover horror and thriller and speculative fiction and lit fic, and every now and then I get a romance. Every now and then. But as Halloween and the first Code Orange has been seen out in the wild, which is crazy because we are only halfway through May, but I gotta wrap my mind around it. But as we get closer, you will start to see more Halloween and art on this channel. I plan to do more vlogging in the future. I'm really excited because there's some things that are starting to happen in my life that are about to open up for me to actually create even more content on this channel. So I'm super excited. If you are interested whatsoever in any of that, please subscribe down below if you aren't already. And let me know what is your favorite mother trope book, because I am always looking for recommendations because I love that trope absolutely. I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.